You have been told your entire life that the path to a better, sharper, more successful version of yourself runs through discipline, routine, and the kind of clean, respectable habits that look good written in a journal and even better posted online. Wake up at 5, meditate for 20 minutes, cold shower, green smoothie, gratitude list, inbox 0, repeat. And maybe some of those things work for you, genuinely, maybe they do. But there is a category of habits that nobody talks about because they look wrong, sound strange, and feel like the kind of thing you'd be embarrassed to admit to. Habits that researchers, neuroscientists, and psychologists have quietly been studying for years and finding the same thing over and over again. They work. Not despite looking weird, sometimes because of it. Because the brain is not a machine that responds to aesthetics, it is an organ that responds to specific inputs. And some of those inputs look nothing like what productivity culture told you they were supposed to look like. So here are the habits that seem bizarre on the surface and are genuinely, scientifically, measurably beneficial underneath. And at least one of them is going to make you feel significantly better about something you already do and have been mildly ashamed of this entire time. The first one is talking to yourself out loud, and not in the quiet, internal monologue way that everyone does, but actually audibly out loud, in a way that would make someone walking past your room genuinely concerned about you. Psychologists at the University of Michigan found that people who verbalize their thoughts and problems out loud, particularly in the third person, referring to themselves by name, showed significantly better emotional regulation, clearer thinking, and more effective problem-solving than people who process the same problems silently. The reason is fascinating and has to do with something called psychological distancing. The act of hearing your own situation described out loud, in your own voice, creates a subtle but measurable shift in your brain's perspective on it, almost as if you are now an observer of your own life rather than someone trapped inside it. When everything lives only inside your head, your thoughts and your emotions are completely entangled. The fear makes the thinking worse, and the worse thinking makes the fear bigger, and the whole thing spirals inward with no exit. But the moment you say it out loud, the moment you hear yourself say, okay, so here's the situation, here's what's actually happening, your brain has to organize the thought well enough to speak it, and that organization alone creates clarity that internal spinning almost never produces. The people you have watched seeming to handle hard situations with unusual calm and unusual clarity are often not people with less emotion. They are people who have found ways, often without knowing the science behind it, to create distance between themselves and their own internal weather, and talking out loud is one of the most effective ways to do that. The second habit is one that productivity culture has declared a cardinal sin for so long that most people feel a low-grade guilt about it even as they do it. And that guilt is not only unnecessary, it is counterproductive. Daydreaming. Genuine, unstructured, mind-wandering daydreaming. The kind where you stare at the ceiling or the window and your brain just goes wherever it wants to go with no agenda, no timer, no app tracking whether you were productive with it. Neuroscientists discovered something extraordinary about what the brain does during these moments. Instead of resting, it activates what they call the default mode network, a system that is responsible for some of the most sophisticated cognitive work your brain ever performs. Creative problem solving, perspective taking, future planning, emotional processing, narrative integration, the ability to take the scattered events of your life and weave them into a coherent story that makes sense. All of this happens not when you are focused and on task, but when you let your mind wander freely without any destination. The research found that people whose minds wander more frequently score higher on measures of creativity, working memory, and the ability to hold complex, multi-step goals in mind while navigating everyday life. Every time you stare out of a window and let your mind go completely aimless, your brain is doing something that no amount of structured focus time can replicate, and the culture that taught you to feel guilty about it was optimizing for visible productivity at the direct expense of the cognitive processes that make genuine insight, creativity, and long-term thinking possible. The third habit is going to resonate with a very specific type of person, and that person has been carrying unnecessary shame about it for a long time. Keeping a messy desk or workspace. Not catastrophically, hopelessly chaotic, but genuinely, visibly untidy in a way that neat people find mildly distressing to look at. A study out of the University of Minnesota found that people working in messy environments consistently produced more creative, more original, more unconventional ideas than people working in clean, organized spaces. The psychological mechanism behind this is related to priming. The environment you are physically inside sends constant signals to your brain about what mode it should be operating in, and a rigidly clean, ordered space primes the brain for conventional thinking, rule-following, and safe, predictable outputs. A messier space subtly signals that the normal rules are slightly relaxed, that convention is not being enforced here, that there is freedom to make unexpected connections and explore ideas that don't fit neatly into an established order. This is why some of the most creatively productive people in history, artists, writers, scientists, musicians, worked in environments that looked to outside observers like barely contained chaos, and why forcing them into clean, organized spaces sometimes had a measurable negative effect on the quality of what they produced. If your desk is a mess and your best ideas seem to come from the middle of it, that is not a character flaw. That is your brain operating in an environment that happens to be calibrated for the kind of thinking you need most. The fourth habit is one that every person who has ever experienced it knows is real, and almost no one talks about publicly because it sounds either lazy or borderline delusional. Lying in bed slightly longer than you need to in that specific state between sleeping and being fully awake, the half-asleep, half-conscious drifting state that scientists call hypnagogia. Salvador Dali famously exploited this state deliberately. He would sit in a chair holding a key above a metal plate, drift into the edge of sleep, and the moment he crossed into unconsciousness, the key would drop onto the plate and wake him. And he claimed this liminal state was where some of his most vivid and creative ideas originated. Neuroscientists have since validated the basic mechanism. In the hypnagogic state, the brain's prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for logic, judgment, and conventional thinking, begins to quiet down before you fully lose consciousness, and in that window your associative thinking, the ability to connect ideas that would normally seem completely unrelated, becomes dramatically more fluid and more generative. A recent study at MIT found that people who were guided into this half-sleep state were significantly more likely to solve creative insight problems than people who were either fully awake or fully asleep. That groggy, half-dreaming state you've been treating as wasted time is actually one of the most cognitively fertile states your brain ever enters. And the fact that you've been rushing through it every morning to get to the productive part of your day means you have been routinely skipping one of the most valuable mental states available to you. The fifth habit is the one that will immediately make sense to anyone who has ever experienced it and will sound completely implausible to anyone who hasn't. Doing repetitive, mindless physical tasks, washing dishes by hand, folding laundry, going for a walk with no headphones, doing something with your hands that requires almost no conscious attention, as a deliberate problem-solving and creative thinking strategy. The research on this is remarkably consistent. When the conscious mind is occupied with a simple, repetitive physical task that requires just enough attention to prevent full mind wandering but not enough to demand real cognitive effort, the unconscious mind is freed up to process complex problems in the background with a fluency that focused, effortful thinking almost never matches. This is why your best ideas come in the shower, on walks, while doing the dishes, not because there is anything magical about water or movement, but because in those moments your conscious mind has something just engaging enough to keep it from interfering with the deeper processing happening underneath it. Psychologists call this incubation, the unconscious background processing of a problem that has been loaded into your mind and then released from conscious attention, and it is one of the most reliable drivers of creative insight and innovative thinking that human cognition researchers have ever documented. The people who seem to consistently produce great ideas are often not the people who think hardest about them. They are the people who load the problem in deeply and then do something completely unrelated and let their brain work on it without their permission or their interference. Your brain is doing extraordinary work in the moments that look the most ordinary, and the habits that support that work don't always look like habits at all. They look like distraction, like laziness, like wasted time, like the things you do between the real work. But the real work is happening there, quietly, constantly, in ways your conscious mind will never fully observe or control. And the most intelligent relationship you can have with your own cognition is to stop fighting those moments and start deliberately creating more of them. The version of you that talks to yourself on the drive home, lets your mind wander out the window, works in a slightly messy space, lingers in the half-dream state before you fully wake up, and does the dishes without a podcast on. That version of you is not failing at productivity. That version of you is giving your brain exactly what it needs to do its best work. If this gave you something real today, share it with one person who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Daily Dose of Knowledge because this channel exists for the people who actually want to understand themselves.